Well, here we are, Braden. We finally made it to theory and philosophy, man. How are you doing today, Braden?
I am doing so well. There's no place I'd rather be than talking theory and philosophy on a Friday night with a bunch of great friends in magic. Thank you.
I know. Can you believe that we're spending our Friday night talking about theory and philosophy? It's going to be a wild night, to say the least. But
Yes, indeed.
so, Braden, I can see that there are a couple people showing up. So I'm going to kind of like give a short intro. I know people were wondering, like, what are we doing here, and what theory and philosophy of magic. So if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of let our audience know what's going on here. So
Absolutely.
so me and Braden, and correct me if I'm wrong, Braden, we've been talking about this quite some time about collaborating, and you were a featured guest on my show, Faust and Company. And we kind of talked about, what would it be like to kind of dive into specific topics in magic. And so through the course of months, me and Braden here, we were saying, well, how cool would it be to kind of get a live stream going, get people in on a panel to talk about a specific topic in magic. And what we came up with was a live stream called Theory and Philosophy of Magic. And our mission here is basically to expand our understanding of the art of magic through thoughtful and friendly discourse, and to kind of accept all points of view on a specific topic. But hopefully our vision here as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Braden, is to create an environment where we can openly discuss topics that are theoretical, philosophical, and ethical, that we believe impact the performance in magic. And do you have anything to add to that? Because I'm trying to sum it up to where it's clear for everyone, and why.
That was perfect. It's really not about us being the experts, but us being conduits to conversation about theory and philosophy and magic, and that's really the key here. So, audience, I hope you have your questions ready, and know that there are no experts here, only
Right.
students.
Right. Brayna, I think that's a great summary to what to expect tonight. And you know, I as a student loved the idea when you brought it up to me that you know a student of magic bringing up certain topics kind of makes you aware of how you're performing. And I think as a performer, what I hope to accomplish is to get better. And I think sometimes it's good to talk about certain topics, and that's what we're here to do today. Braden, what can we expect tonight on the show, my friend?
Well, it's going to be a whole lot of fun. We have two fabulous guests, and I will tell you that any discussion about phenomenology and
Ah,
magic, we have to have magic, right, Chris?
we do, my friend. I'm assuming that you have something to show for us then.
Indeed. Cue the music.
Queuing.
Three coins in the fountain, through the ripples, how they shine. Just one wish will be granted. One heart will wear a valentine. Make it mine, make it mine, make it mine.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you. Tonight's conversation is not about drinking cheap beer, it's about enjoying the sophistication of a fine wine here today. So, I'd like to first introduce our panelists, starting with Napoleon Ryan. Napoleon is an actor and a magician from London. Napoleon moved to North America in 2010 and is now based out of Los Angeles. Please welcome Napoleon Ryan.
Napoleon, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello, hello, hi guys.
Hey, Napoleon. Napoleon is one of the most energetic and entertaining performers that I know personally. I've had the chance to see him perform, and he really goes all out. It's very impressive, and I thank you for being a part of this discussion today. Our next guest that we want to introduce is Michael Smith. Michael Smith is a retired pastoral and psychotherapist. He's an educator, a lifelong magician who explores the meanings and the implications of make-believe, imagine, play, creativity, wonder, and the theatrical arts for magical performances. And he has a wonderful book called Make Believe, Discovering and Creating Magical Experiences. Please welcome Michael Smith.
Hi, guys.
Michael.
Hi.
Michael, welcome to the program. And I want to acknowledge the fifth member of this panel tonight, and that is you watching on live stream, whether you're on Facebook or whether you're on YouTube. Your questions, your thoughts matter to this discussion. That's how we all get better. If you're a magician out there, please share this live stream with other magicians. It will truly benefit us and them and magic in general. So I thank you as the fifth participant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we could begin our discussion about phenomenology
yes.
and magic. And I'll really kick it off with the penultimate question here. What is phenomenology and what is it doing in magic?
Any one of our panelists? I got to admit, though, Braden, I'm one of the new people here in terms of phenomenology. And I just wanted to say I'm very excited to be sitting with our panelists today. So I'm very curious about phenomenology. Does anyone want to take that question? Michael, Napoleon?
Well,
I think Michael should jump in.
Phenomenology is not really a school within philosophy. It's more of a method that cuts across all fields. And it's a way of viewing the world and ourselves that's pretty different from the more analytical way that Western culture tends to operate.
Yeah.
And I can go into the history and so on, but it basically is more of a style more than a set, a bunch of principles. And I like to use the word experience when it comes to talking. So in my book title, I may have a chapter on phenomenology, but the subtitle is Discovering and Creating Magical Experiences. Right. Because the truth of the matter is I got into magic because I had an experience.
Yeah.
And that is what led me into a kind of lifetime of chasing after this. Now, in the world of philosophy and the psychology and even in the art world, phenomenology is well known. But I'll stop there.
Thank you, Michael. Napoleon, do you have anything to add, or as far as what phenomenology is, or your experience with phenomenology?
Yeah, Michael wrote a very interesting sort of working definition in his book in chapter 2, and I think he said it's a particularly 20th century kind of thing. But I thinking about what little philosophy I know over the centuries, there does seem to be sort of a parallel with, say, Cartesian philosophy, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. This idea of your experience of the world informs your perception of the world around you. And then also maybe perhaps going back to the ancient Greeks and Epicurus, the Epicureans, where, they're, instead of something very grand and perhaps the Stoics or something very grand and noble, Epicurus was all about, simple pleasures like a bowl of cheese, because unfortunately he had terrible digestion. And so simple foods for him meant that he didn't have terrible digestion. And so his philosophy grew around that. So I can see there's parallels, like how you experience the world informs this philosophical school. And of course, when it comes to magic, we're trying to create a reality for our audiences that hopefully that they want to be a part of, but also create some kind of perception of what this reality is. And we are either doing it with them or perhaps creating reality maybe not with them, where we're creating this impression or deceptive impression of what's going on around them.
Right.
Yeah, I like to say, which is a takeoff on Peter Samuelson's definition, when he says that I don't do magic, I help you see magic. And I change that a little bit to say, I can't do magic, I can help you experience magic. Because I think it involves more than just sight. I think the whole range of emotional experiences. Yeah, you're right that this goes back beyond the earlier than the 20th century, but it was basically in the mid 1800s to the mid 1900s that philosophically it began to be known as phenomenology and talked about. And Edmund Husserl was seen as the founding father of that. And one of the things I can use as an analogy here is he loved coffee, and said, to his students, tell me about coffee. Well, a more analytical approach would be talking about how coffee is grown and harvested and processed and packaged and sold and then made in the coffee shop and so forth. And he would say that's not phenomenology. A phenomenology would get at what is it that you experience when you drink coffee? What is the smell? What is the taste? What is the aroma? And what is it like for a hot liquid to go down your throat? And so phenomenology is more interested in that side of reality. It doesn't deny the more analytical or scientific notions that we have about life, but it is saying, don't stop there, go deeper. You can go into individual experiences. And that's where I think we can talk about our methods in performing a magic trick. Okay, that's great. But what is it that the audience experiences or you want them to experience? What is it you're trying to create when you create a magical effect? When I see Chris has a definite notion of what he's trying to create in the minds and lives of people who are viewing files. So anyway.
I told you we were going to go deep tonight.
It's getting deep.
This is phenomenal, and I want to. I'll go back to something that Michael and Napoleon brought up, but Chris, we want to acknowledge Jessica in the chat. I think she had some good comments there. You know how to pour a good glass of wine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica.
Well, I love to listen to wine tasters talk, professional wine to talk about their experience with a particular wine, Brandon. So that is a more phenomenological approach to talking about wine, for example.
Yeah, if I could jump in, I think it's a great your demonstration of that wine trick that we talked about this before is what is that person experiencing, and I think a wine taster or a sommelier can tell you so many different experiences that are very personal to themselves. Mm-hmm. That I myself might not experience the earthy notes of the wine or even the apricot notes. But I think what I got from Napoleon and Michael Braden is the word experience. What is the audience experiencing? And for a layman who's just being introduced to phenomenology, I think it's very important that we recognize that when we're up here on stage, we recognize that we are doing this for their experience as well. And I think that's what I'm getting out of what phenomenology is.
So another interesting thing I would just say is that the fact that the person's individual experience is valid, it then sort of leads to the natural conclusion that every audience's experience is valid. So as a magician, performing magic, you may perform a certain trick and expect the audience to take certain impression away. But obviously, you know, sometimes tricks or routines or effects are a little bit more, you know, they could be more profound, or they could be a bit more ephemeral in their interpretation by the audience. But if you're going along this phenomenological, philosophical track, every audience member's perception of what they thought they saw is equally valid. And so in a way, as a magician, you don't want to say, this is the only way you can interpret this thing I'm doing. There are lots of different ways, and you're, you know, you may never know how somebody interprets what they've seen you do.
Right.
But it's still equally valid to them. How, you know, it leads into like reader response theory in literature and all these kind of different disciplines.
Now, phenomenology would, Husserl would say that we need to bracket. He used the phrase bracketing. That's withholding judgment and preconceived notions. So when you say that everybody's experience needs to be taken, that would be his way of saying was don't bracket. I mean, be sure to bracket and not approach. And you know, even today, if you take a layperson and say, let's go see a magic show, it's very interesting. What is their preconceived notions of what a magician is and what they're going to see? And that leads them down a certain path, and maybe even makes the decision about whether they're going to go or not, or, you know, or take it seriously or not. And one of the things about phenomenology that I like is it takes into account the ordinary. You know, I love to watch actors do their thing on stage, because even the very ordinary experience of lighting a cigarette or picking up an object can take on enormous meaning in that moment. And phenomenology would take that seriously. Or Mark Twain's use of pauses in his speaking. It was powerful, you know. And I remember seeing Hal Holbrook do his show and how he used pauses to create an experience.
Yes.
And anyway.
I think Eugene Berger does, well, he did that a lot.
Yes.
He focused on pauses.
Yes.
And, you know, that was quite of an education for me. You know, I would, and I think you brought up something, Michael, that what does the audience expect from a magic show? And I would love to hear it. If people are out there watching right now, I would love to hear, what do you expect from a magic show, especially those who aren't performing magicians?
Right.
What do you expect with magic? I know that I expect some sort of enchantment or wonderment. I don't know what you guys expect, but that's what I expect in a magic show, to be enchanted.
I think that's where the pausing comes in a very technical and very useful technique to pause, because you have everyone on a different experiential kind of journey, because they come with, you know, the preconceived notions, as we're talking about. They come with their own, you know, baggage of the day, so to speak. They, you know, maybe there's a subtext or a context that whole purchase of the tickets was made over. Maybe it was for a birthday party, or maybe it was to rekindle a lost, you know, relationship. They're trying to, you never know what people are coming into that experience with. And what I love about the pausing is that everyone can kind of catch up.
Right.
Because I think, hey, Tim, we just want to acknowledge Tim for a second. Hey, Tim, thank you so much for popping in here. What does he say? A pause creates a moment for someone to digest what they're just experiencing, create context for themselves.
That's
well
right.
said, Tim. I love that. I couldn't have said it better. And it goes back to kind of what you guys were talking about. So I have another question for the group, because I think we covered our second question, which is what are some factors that might, you know, influence an experience. But I want to pop this centering quote out here from Magic and Meaning by Bob Neal and Eugene Berger. An analytical experience is not a magical experience.
All
Do
right.
you guys agree, disagree? Where are you at on that conversation or that thought? Go ahead, Michael.
I'll jump in there again. I can remember when I was 11 years old, I saw my first live magic show. And this was before the days we even had television in our home. That tells you I'm old, okay? But I was 11. It was Mark Wilson at a grand opening of a supermarket in my neighborhood. And he was still, this was before he went to California and did his thing. But that was the first live magic show. And I stayed for all three of his shows, was late for supper, got in trouble with my mom, all of that. But one of the things I remember saying is to her, I think I want to do magic, Mom. Because I fell in love that day with magic because I fell in love with my feelings of what I was experiencing and what I thought I saw the audience experiencing. Oh, I had my questions about his tricks and so forth and how they did it and all of that. But the primary thing was my experience. And I realized a few years ago, I've been chasing that experience all my life.
Yes.
And Braden, to come back to your analytical question, because this is where I want to go. I can remember a few years ago going to a magic convention where you had assigned seatings for the evening shows. And I won't name the magician, but he's deceased now. But he was and his wife were sitting right next to me. And throughout the show, he was leaning over, whispering to her what the tricks were, how he was doing them, what was right with the lighting, what was wrong with the lighting, what was the, and I was ready to throttle this guy because I was there to have an experience. Now we can go out afterwards and have coffee and talk about the particulars of the show and break it down and I'm into that. But in that moment, I wanted to have the experience of enchantment and wonder and awe. And for me, what he was engaged in was analytical behavior. And I was trying to engage in experiential behavior, by listening and just letting my child come out again, So enough, that's just an illustration I can pull out of the air real quick.
I think that sums it up very nicely. And Chris, I think we had someone else pop a comment in there.
Oh, yes, we did. Let me pull this one. This one is first from I think we all know who this is. This is Jeff McBride. Michael is a wonderful storyteller, and that he is. And
Well,
that he is.
Thank you, Jeff.
And also, I think Tim Converse, who, by the way, is a magic and mystery school instructor, he writes here, if phenomenology validates all experience, then analytical is a valid way to approach it. My stepfather is a scientist, and when I perform for him, he tries to follow it and analyze it. But the mystery he can't solve becomes the experience of magic for him.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Wow, well said,
Well
Tim.
done. Well said.
And I think, and finally, Tommy Burnett says, I agree with Michael. And so do I. Also, one last comment from Jeff. It says, yes, so good to listen to this groups. Thank you very much, Jeff. And I think for all people out there who know, I think all of us here are students of Jeff McBride at the Magic and Mystery School.
Yes.
And I think what's great is I think because at least I can speak for me, because I'm a Magic and Mystery School student, I do think about these topics and I try to become more aware to enhance and elevate my performance. And I think that's what we're here to do, and I appreciate everyone's, contribution here tonight. So I think the question remains, Braden, is an analytical experience a magical experience? And I think, well,
not really.
Napoleon, please counter opinion here. I love it.
Yeah, I just think, and I mean, analytical experience, it's not, I work primarily with children, and, you know, you could take any trick and do it. And, you know, if it's sufficiently amazing, I mean, yes, you'll get a reaction, but there's always that kind of question of, well, what does it really mean? What's the context? What is, and I think it's the same with adults. I mean, you can take any illusion and do it, but if you don't add drama and story and sort of all sorts of other intangible things that provoke an emotional response, then it doesn't really live. You know, I mean, you could do something that is magical and that is mystifying to people, but that's a puzzle. You know, magic isn't what you do. I mean, we could all do the same trick, but ultimately, you know, the emotional response of the audience is going to be how we do it, not sort of if we use the same piece of apparatus or the same slide or whatever it might be. It's how they respond to what we do with the trick or the piece of apparatus or the slide or the routine.
Yeah.
So, you know, ultimately it is an emotional experience. And I think if you are, I know I talked with Braden about this before. I read something about public speaking where, you know, if you engage someone on 7 or 8 different levels, emotionally or with comedy or different things, when you're presenting a piece of information, you hit home much harder than if you present it with an analytical series of statistics, if you're making your case, because people don't have an emotional connection to that. And if you have something there that is slightly suspect in your statistics, you know, because you're not engaging all these different areas of the brain at the same time, you're just engaging the logical analytical side, you'll find that people will pick holes in your argument very quickly. Whereas if you're funny and you have an emotional story as well, it's much harder for an audience who's following that to sort of pick holes in what you're saying. And obviously that helps when you're presenting magic, because you're essentially presenting something that's, you know, a logical impossibility, but it's not necessarily impossible to logically work out why it's happening. But if you're doing it in a whole sort of a scenario of, you know, like take, say, recently we saw some work from Jonathan Pendragon on Mystery School and how he presented his illusions. You know, he created this exciting narrative, even though it wasn't spoken. He created this whole mise en scène, and it just lifts the actual illusion itself from being, you know, a transposition of somebody or a levitation of somebody or a disappearance of somebody. It becomes something much greater than the actual effect itself.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more, Napoleon. And if you take the piece of wine magic and coin magic that I did at the top of the show, and you take the music out of it, it's not as good, right?
Right.
And that's an audience appeal. And Fitzke talks about audience appeals and lists them out in Showmanship for Magicians. Really highly recommend. I want to go real quick to what Vitalia said.
Yes.
Magic equals mystery you can't solve. And wonderful point, Vitalia. And I want to bring everyone to page 23 of Magic and Meaning, where puzzles versus magic is gone through in detail. And it's very interesting that she brings that point up, because one of the aha moments for me was that instead of it being a puzzle to be solved, the authors Robert Neal and Eugene Berger say rather have them be mysteries to be experienced.
Yes.
And I think that is a powerful thing. So thank you for bringing that up. And I want to go real fast around the room here. Yes or no on this one? Napoleon, you brought up a great kind of counterpoint to what that magical experience is. So is demonstration of skill magical? Can it be magical? Napoleon.
If it's magical to you, it's magical. But it may not be magical to all the rest of the audience. But if it's magical to you, and as you know, if you're a magician, you probably have a greater interest in the techniques as well. So there is, you know, that can be a valid. So, you know, maybe going back a little bit, analytically, it can be a valid interpretation of a trick, but a lay audience may not agree.
Gotcha. All right, Michael, your response to that question.
Well, I think it can be. I just believe that it can be more. For example, Xiam Lin is very skilled artist. But when you look at his shows, how he dresses, the music, the smoke, the whole that's all part of it. And if you just look at his card technique, that can be, especially to magicians, that could be really wow. But I think to the lay audience and to most of us, when he adds the other dimensions to it, then it makes it even more magical. That's how I would answer.
Yeah. A kind of a trick question, Chris. What's your take on that?
Well, I think my experience, and I think the question was brought up earlier, was what do I expect from a magic show? And at least for me, and being from the Magic and Mystery School, I had always felt that, and I think Eugene Berger talked about this in his new book From Beyond, saying that you could take something as simple as the bonnet trick, where you crush up and tear up paper and you restore it into this hat. It's one of the most simplest things to do. Is that really a display of sleight? But for me, when I first saw it, because I was never exposed to it, it was magical because of the way he presented it to me. And I had seen like knuckle busting sleight of hand, but the way it was presented I didn't get that experience that I expected from a magic show or a routine, where premise and the feel, the sound, the mood,
the interaction
that
went on between he and usually the woman. And
so the experience for me wasn't magical, even though it was a knuckle busting move that I couldn't do. If I may, Braden, I wanted to point out that Vitalia is a student of mime and clown, and so I just wanted to say thank you for throwing that comment out there, because when she said that, I immediately thought about Eugene again, and maybe Jeff can chime in, but he did say that life itself is a mystery. And so that to me is magic. It's like, this feeling. And like you said, phenomenology is experience. But there are other comments here. So just a reminder, Braden, that, I'd love to tackle it.
Let's do it, Chris. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know Willie Yee had something going on here, and he made a comment. He said, for the first time I learned how a magic trick worked was itself a magical experience, that things could be done. Thank you, Willie, for that. And I think Tommy Burnett, a good friend of mine, he says, I know what Michael was talking about. One of my best friends is a tremendous magician and is constantly thinking about magic. When we go to a magic show, he's constantly analyzing the show while I'm trying to enjoy the magic and mystery. And finally, Braden, and this is Tim, the puzzle presentation is an early stage of a magician's evolution. It's where we all tend to start as we get a feel for what we can do. I think that's a great point there from Tim.
I think so as well. I really appreciate everyone commenting and asking questions too. We love your participation. We're doing this for all of us, so we appreciate your comments. I will do rapid fire again, because I think as we talk about some major experiences that I think about when I think about going to a magic show, and again, these are buckets that we might drop percentages of the audience in. Maybe 20% of the audience is in this bucket. Maybe 20% is in this bucket. Well, one of those buckets, I think, is confusion. They're confused about what they're seeing. Is confusion magic? Michael?
No, I don't think so. I think no. I don't equate confusion at all. I think that people want a certain degree of clarity in their experiences. And someone can be puzzled or curious, but that's not necessarily the same thing as when I hear the word confusion. I think Di Vernon once had a quote or something that confusion is not magic or not a mystery. So no.
All right, Napoleon, do you want to weigh in on confusion?
Yeah, I think you see in other art forms, you could say a load of random things in stand-up comedy, non sequiturs, and you'll get a laugh because there is a disruption between the ideas you're saying and the ideas you just said. But that doesn't mean that your set suddenly is funny.
Right.
And it's same with the story. You can have 3 people come on stage and then shoot each other, and then another 3 people come on stage and shoot each other, and keep going like that. But after an hour, people are going to get a bit bored of that, and they won't know what's going on. So you have to have some kind of storyline. So yeah, no, I don't think confusion is particularly entertaining, or because why are we there? What are we supposed to get out of this? What's the meaning behind this? I do wonder about the Di Vernon quote, whether he was saying confusion is not magic, as in, I wonder what he means by his thinking about magic, whether he means it's like a theatrical magical experience or an experience of wonder. But I do agree, deception on its own, or even confusing deception, is not, it can leave you cold.
Yes, and you actually bring in a good segue here to one of my questions that I have. This will be the other one. Is deception magic, Michael?
Well,
the experience of deception, like being deceived, is that magical?
Let me answer it this way. I don't think, in terms of performance magic, if the deception is not there, it's not real magic. But if only you consider deception, Max Howard said it's about everything else in terms of performance magic. And what he's trying to say as an actor and a theatrically based performer. So I think that the deception must be there, but I think there's also need for more than just deception for it to be a real magical experience for me. Now I'm only speaking out of my own experiences.
Your own phenomenology. Napoleon, what's your take on it?
I think deception is the other side, or one of the other sides of the coin from amazement or wonder. So it depends, really. If your persona is more like, say, Pop Hayden or Chef Anton, or one of these kind of like, or Danny Archer in his is it Gino Mozzarella? If you're playing the fast talking street scammer guy, then deception is a very big part, perhaps, of what you're doing. But I wouldn't say. I reckon if you asked all of them, that's not the whole thing that they're trying to achieve. I think they want wonder, and they also want, they want a more nuanced characterization than just that guy who's going to swindle you, or will show you how the swindle is achieved. I personally, in my work, would go more for amazement or wonder, because I think that's more empowering for the audience, particularly if they're under 10. But again, it depends what your persona is, and whether deception is part of your character's like motivation to be doing magic.
Well said, Chris. Your thoughts on that, and any reactions from our 5th panelist?
Well, once again, so I'll go over the 5th panelist because they're coming in real quickly here. But I just wanted to cover here that Willie E says, I've had participants respond with astonishment, but the words they use are, I'm so confused. I think that's a great point. For me, particularly, confusion, at least I don't experience magic. When I get confused and I can't follow, I lose that experience of enchantment. So the spell is broken almost. But I think Tommy Burnett, he says people generally don't like being deceived. I tend to side with that, Braden, as far as, because I love deception occasionally. But on the other hand, when I watch Richard Turner and he's openly saying that he's going to deceive you with these gambling techniques,
Mm-hmm.
that to me is a magical experience, because I don't know what he does. He's just being openly honest with me. And therefore I'm in a different mindset. I'm no longer, I'm kind of watching him. I'm watching with him, if that makes sense. Whereas when someone is trying to deceive you, they're not
Mm-hmm.
telling you outright that I'm going to deceive you. But I think with deception, Richard Turner, and I'm not sure if he would describe his magic that way, but I know I'm being deceived, but I still get a magical experience.
And you're witnessing skill as well.
Yes,
So that's
absolutely.
fascinating. Yes.
I think you feel. Oh, sorry.
No, let me just go through this. Two comments here. Napoleon, deception is a tool to create a larger effect, from Tim Converse. And then finally, Napoleon said it best for me. But I think that's true for adults too. I think your summary, Tommy agrees with.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, Chris, when you feel complicit, when somebody supposedly exposes something to you, you feel that sense of complicity. You feel, whether it turns out that they trick you in the end, like a sucker silk to egg routine or any sucker routine, or whether they do actually tell you how the gambling cheats work. You initially at least feel that sort of warmth from you feel like a kindred spirit with the performer. And so the complicity, it diminishes the potential sting of any magic you may have experienced before, any deceptive magic. And I think sometimes you also get that with the sort of conspiracy routines, like Slidini's paper balls overhead, or Bongo's big balloon burst.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps, when, the audience, a member of the audience is on stage and can't see what the rest of the audience can see. And it's very, even though, they're experiencing a different reality to the rest of the audience, the audience feel very much in tune with the magician. And, I know they know that the person on stage is being deceived, but they don't mind so much because they're in on it too.
Yes. I thinking about just that topic alone, there's so many magicians who do that sort of routine, but so much care is placed, again, in the experience of the audience when they're actually let in to a certain degree. And I think, when that happens, when the performer can craft it that way, at least with Richard Turner, I'm not left puzzled. I just accept the fact that perhaps my level of understanding on what he's doing is just not up there yet.
When you experience him, you're experiencing a deep mystery.
Yes. Deep,
a living mystery. Absolutely.
Right. A mastery of mystery. And I'm willing to submit to that and enjoy,
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I will kind of segue into a couple things that were brought up. So one is this idea of confusion. And Michael, in your book, you reference the that's fair, no way.
Uh-huh.
And I think as we think through this, that process of that's fair, I think there's a lot that's in there, because we take that line for granted. We take that phraseology for granted. And I think maybe Larry Haas had some work on that one as well.
Right.
But I think that's fair is screaming to us magicians as saying, if I've learned anything from Jeff, and I've learned many things, one of those things is to digest, slow down, and give people the information at the time that they need it, not sooner, not later, so that they can digest exactly what's happening through the whole routine. And I think we miss the that's fair, and we focus on kind of the end, but I think there's a whole lot in that's fair. What are your thoughts, Michael?
Well, let me think about that. Go on to someone else. Let me
These are the hard questions.
I love that. Is Eugene Berger, I think, is where I got it originally, and then Larry picked up on it, and so on. So what I'm trying to do is talk about it's about perception. we look at something and if it fits our box of how things ought to be or how things ought to go, well, then that's where that's fair comes in. And then okay. Okay. So Chris, you use Jeff's best ever not off silk.
Yes.
Like-
yes.
Like many of us do. Okay.
Yes.
Well, it starts off, you've got a nice silk handkerchief, and that's fair.
Yes.
And you stretch it out. That's fair. And then you rope it. Oh, that's fair. And then you tie a knot. That's fair. And then you tighten it. Oh, that's fair. And then all of a sudden, you start sliding the knot down. And that trick is constructed that way.
Yes.
To take the audience on a ride. And I think that's part of what magic is about. We show a deck of cards, or we show our hands empty, or what we're trying to do is help people start with their preconceived notions and their perception of how things ought to be, and then move them along, and then wham, that's where the magic takes place. And then you sometimes have to let them come down slowly, or sometimes it's wham bam, But I think that's more of a theatrical construction, creating a certain arc that is then where it's magical. So it's about perception, and I think that one of the leading phenomenologists back in the 20th century was the Frenchman Maurice Merleau-Ponty, and he was a phenomenologist and wrote a great deal about perception. Larry Haas wrote a book about Merleau-Ponty, and he and I were having a discussion one day, and I asked Larry, what philosopher do you think would be interested in seeing a good magic show? And so he thought, and I thought, and then we both came up with Merleau-Ponty's name at the same time. So, because he talked about the phenomenology of embodiment, the way the body is used to express ourselves, to express our experiences. And really, phenomenology is about experiencing our experiences. I mean, that's a play on words, but I think that's what it's about.
And understanding, you've just enlightened me to the wisdom that's inside of one effect that I'm sure many of us perform in various ways. And you're right, it is so simple. And if we can just take that lesson and apply it, okay, how does that look when it comes to this thing that I do? Am I doing that over here? Am I doing it over here with this piece? Am I doing what Beckos has taught me? I think that's phenomenal. I think Tommy Burnett as well had kind of highlighted that. That's really amazing, the wisdom that's packed into one piece. And so thank you, Michael, for bringing that out. I will share this. I know we're talking about deception and magic. One of the mystery school programs that was held a couple months back was Experiencing the Impossible. And Gustav Kuhn actually went through some of the experiments and the thought process behind the science and some of the learnings from the Magic Lab. And one of the definitions that he gave in that piece was magic is an experience of wonder that results from a cognitive conflict between things that we experience and things we believe to be impossible. Yes. And I'll also go on a little bit further on the deception piece. Experiencing magic does not produce the same neural activity that the experience of deception or the experience of a puzzle creates. So they actually studied folks that were doing puzzles they studied folks that were being deceived and they found out about it. And then they studied folks that were having magic performed. And there was different neurological happenings inside the brain. And I found that absolutely fascinating. And I think that could be part of phenomenology. I don't know, Michael and Napoleon, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I was going to say a little bit on the comment of confusion and structuring. There's a sort of parallel structure in comedy, because, you know, comedy and magic are very related. We both use misdirection. Both forms use misdirection to get their ultimate effect. Obviously, with a joke, you have some kind of setup, and the punchline has to have a relationship with the setup, so that people know, they can see that, you know, although the punchline isn't what they expected, they can see that there's a clear enough relation that it makes sense. And it's the same with magic. You know, for example, with Bekos, you know, the fact that you make a knot out of a handkerchief, okay, you expect that. That's the assumption you expect. But pulling it off, that's the thing you don't expect. Right. But because you can see that one, you know, is related to the other, I mean, the effect could be something else completely. But because it's using the same prop, it's not random. So the brain is pleasantly surprised by that stimulus, by that sudden sort of pulling off of the knot. And we understand it. And we get that sort of wonder of, we know it can't be done, but we're seeing it happen. And it's kind of the same thing when you're telling a stand-up comedy joke. You know, I mean, almost actually, funny enough, that's fair, no way! It's actually comedy triplet pattern in comedy writing. It's like, ba-dum, ba-dow, like that. Like, that's one kind of, that actual phrasing is actually one kind of way of structuring a joke. But yeah, no, I think, you know, I think you, as Michael said, you have to have a relationship between the beginning state that everyone's watching and the end state that everyone experiences in the magic and in the comedy. Otherwise, you know, they can't see that there's a relationship and that there's a surprising relationship or unexpected relationship. If the relationship's too similar in comedy, you get people groaning at jokes and they go, "Oh, it's a pun. Oh, yeah." I mean, they don't hate it, but it's a bit like, it's not very witty. It's not very clever. It's not. But when you get something that people can see is related, then you get like a belly laugh. And I think it's the same with magic. If something is related but unexpected, you get more of a sense of wonder. But if it's related and it's not very magical, then it's not magic.
Right. Yeah.
That's fascinating. The associative, the mind is being used in that, in the joke setup, and that you shouldn't be surprised by the punchline, but you are when it's a great joke, because you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming, but that association was there. I just never saw it.
Yeah.
Because you've been misdirected. But yeah, exactly. You can see the relationship, and it's a pleasant surprise as opposed to a groan or not funny, or, you know.
Absolutely. I want to kind of bring in one more thought process here, which is the audience. Now we have the fifth panelist here, which is our wonderful audience that's been providing so much to us over the course of this almost hour. So I just want to thank everyone out there for commenting and sharing and really getting involved in this discussion that we're having today. I really appreciate that. One of the things that we need to consider, I think, as magicians is the audience. And I'll bring something to your attention, which is called The Audience Experience, a critical analysis of audience in the performing arts. Now, you can find this on Google. So if you put in The Audience Experience, you can access it PDF through Google. But it talks about the things that audiences are coming to the theater for. And one of those things, there's four of them. One is they want to learn something. They want self-knowledge. They want to grow in some sort of self-awareness thing. They're also concerned about risk. What's involved? You know, am I going to have to go up on stage at a magic show? That's a factor. Authenticity. They're looking for authentic performers, genuine performers. They're believable. That's what they want. I mean, and you can kind of think outside too, like when you watch American Idol or America's Got Talent or The Voice, and you're watching you're watching the performance, which is what, 30 seconds, but you spent 5 minutes absorbing their story, their authentic story. And that's what really drives you. You're rooting for them. But that's what theater audiences are looking for, according to this study. So, and then the last thing, what does the social thing look like? Is it going to be, am I going to be at a table talking with people? Am I going to be elbow to elbow standing? Am I going to be sitting? So those are all part of that phenomenological experience that's created. And I just wanted to kind of pull that out and mention that.
Mhm. Mhm.
All right, we're going to do 3 things right now. We are going to talk a little bit about Michael and Napoleon. If you have any social media or where to find your book, Make Believe, we'll go through that, and then we'll have some final thoughts, and we'll also go through some powerful questions for the group.
Okay.
So Michael, yes.
Well, you mentioned the book. It's called Make Believe, Discovering and Creating Magical Experiences, and it's under my name, D. Michael Smith. And it can be ordered through Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And it basically is about 28 short, I emphasize short essays, 500 to 700 words. So they were originally written for e-newsletter for the Dallas Magic Club, and then edited. And then I've also got 3 of my effects that I've used, a couple of close-up and 1 stand-up effect that's in it, and a reading list. And so if you want to, and it's divided into 3 broad sections: the kind of psychology and philosophy of magic, the whole kind of the creative arts section, and then magic as a gift that we've received and that we give. I believe magic is a gift. So that's basically the book. The other thing I would mention is Jeff Grimes and myself have created a website for Bob Neal. If you really want to know about Bob, go to nealmagic.info. And we have a website that's dedicated to Bob's work. And we have, and what is at the heart of it is a 22-page index of his works. So if you really want to dig in, then Bob has been real helpful and has been a good friend. So not only to Jeff and I, but certainly to the school and to the greater magic community. So those would be 2 things that I would mention. And then if you want to communicate directly with me, let me just, if you could bring up my email address, there it is, lightmike44@gmail.com. And I'll be glad to respond if you have any concerns or questions.
Wonderful. And I will just say that I do have a copy of the index, and it is phenomenal to be able to go through the trilogy of magic that Bob Neal and Larry Haas really put together. And I just want to commend you guys for taking the time to do that, because once you get into that work, whether it's celebrating illusions or any of the trilogy, really, Essay on Magic, it's so rich with stuff, and there's so many ways to kind of cross-pollinate, and you guys have kind of linked it together.
Yeah.
So
and Bob is a real phenomenologist. I mean, he owns that. And so I even have a section on the web about Bob as a phenomenologist. So,
wow, wonderful. Thank you, Michael. And Napoleon, how can we get a hold of you? How can we contact you? Anything you got going on or want to plug?
Well, I'm afraid, unfortunately, I haven't written any books on magic. But I do want to put a shout out for Michael's book. It is very interesting, indeed. Lots of great food for thought. Lots of great starting points on how to improve what you do, to think more deeply about what you do. And another thing that I think is pertinent to this particular thing today is I put a shout out for Pop Hayden's 2017 Magic Castle lecture notes on magic and story.
oh, okay.
Yeah, they're very interesting. And funny, he talks a lot about how, one of the differences between, say, narrative theatre and magic theatre or a magic show is that, you know, the audience can be a part of the action, whereas, you know, they're living more vicariously through the characters on stage in a conventional narrative or legitimate or storytelling piece of theatre. And I was wondering, because in Michael's chapter on phenomenology in his book, he talks about various American film critics arguing over whether the Now You See Me films set in the world of Las Vegas magic and international heists and con artists, whether they're good. And some people really like the films and some critics don't like them. And I wonder if it's slightly connected to what Pop says in his lecture, where, you know, you're watching a film and I think they feel it. I think they say in your précis of the reviews that it's, yes, it looks like magic, but it's not magic. And I think what they're kind of saying is, by watching a film about it, they're not part of it. And I think that's why some of the critics didn't like it, is because I think they felt they could be a part of it. Some of the critics loved it because maybe they just loved the idea of it and the heist elements. But some of the critics that Michael talked about didn't see it really as a magic show. And I think maybe it connects a little bit to what Pop was talking about in terms of, you know, people like to go to a magic show to be part of the action, or at least feel like they're close to the action and have it happen in real time in front of them, rather than sort of watching characters who they can identify with go through the struggles of the story. But yeah, I definitely recommend that as something to read as well, because it talks about experiencing magic a lot, and you know, how as magicians we can create an experience that hopefully is more resonant for an audience.
Napoleon, if I could just jump in here, is it okay for people to contact you via your Facebook? Is that something that I already put it out there? So I guess they have no.
Oh yeah, for sure. You know,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I haven't got any books that I've written on magic, or anything else yet. But maybe one day.
Too busy reading, yes.
Right, but they can definitely reach out to you if they have any questions, especially with those notes that Pop Hayden written. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of inquiry on that.
Yeah.
So.
All right, wonderful. And just if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, just know that I do, in fact, have a show at the Lost Oak Winery on September 3rd.
Yeah.
So if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area on September 3rd, come out to a magical night at the winery. We've got wonderful dinner. We've got some jazz music by my good friend Dave Lincoln, plays amazing jazz guitar, and of course a magic show. So enjoy that, or come out or reach out to me for details.
Wonderful, wonderful. Braden, I think we have come to the point where we should round it off to our final thoughts. What do you think?
I think so. We have some of our powerful questions we can pull up to kind of get us started.
And let me pull them up right here.
And this is for the fifth panelist and for our audience here today and our guests. Ask yourself these questions. Are we creating the experience of magic or the experience of deception? Think about this deeply. Does our performance guide our audiences to the experience that is analytical, or are we guiding them to a magical experience? You are the X factor in the phenomenological equation, I think. You as the magician are the X factor in that equation, and you need to make sure, we all need to make sure that we're guiding them where we want them to go. How can we strengthen each of our pieces to be more magical? So think about how can you take some of the concepts that we talked about today and put that lens on your pieces. How can we bring more authenticity to our performance?
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. How can we be more genuine in our presentation and our interaction with our audience? And finally, how do we encourage our audiences to approach their lives from a state of wonder? I will add that S.H. Sharp said, the underlying purpose of magic in its many aspects is not to deceive people, but to encourage them to approach life and the cosmos in a state of wonder. And with that, we'll go around for final thoughts. Napoleon.
Yeah, I think a question I'd add is, what do you want the audience to say after seeing your show? Or how do you want them to talk about what they've seen? Is your show the show where you made a unicorn appear? Or is your show the show where you raised the dead in a seance? what is it that you want people to say about the experience of being with you for that hour or 45 minutes or 2 hours, whatever it might be? What do you want them to say and take away and recreate in the telling to their friends?
That experience becomes the story. Powerful. Thank you, Napoleon. Michael.
Well, I think the thought I would leave with you is I'm going to paraphrase, I believe, Joseph Campbell, that famous thinker, mythologist, Jungian-based thinker. He said that something to the effect that most people think that that most people seek meaning in life, and he said, I think that what most people are actually looking for is the experience of being alive.
Powerful. Chris, final word on you, final thought for you.
Absolutely. First off, I just want to say thank you guys, for allowing me to be part of all this. But what I had learned today about phenomenology is that it was a great reminder to kind of look at what I'm doing on the stage and why I'm here for.
Mm-hmm.
And what I had gotten from everyone's discussion was the experience of the audience. I already know what experience I get, and I think as a performer, we should take great care in the delivery of that experience to the audience. Whether it is in our scripting, in our skill set, I think we really have to take great care in being able to deliver the best performance we can, to deliver that experience that we hope to achieve. And that's what I got today.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for that reminder.
Indeed. Thank you guys for being here. And I want to thank finally the fifth panelist, the audience. What are your final thoughts as we close out tonight? What did you take away from this conversation today as we bid you adieu into the night on a Friday night here on the internet? So thank you guys.
Thank you guys. Thank you everyone out there once again on our very first episode of Theory and Philosophy of Magic. We appreciate all of you tuning in. Napoleon, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom and thoughts. Michael Smith, I'm humbled that you're here to share your thoughts on the topic of phenomenology, and we'd love to have you come again. Braden, Braden Daniels, my co-host, thank you for putting all this together. And I hope that everyone out there will tune in once again. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Chris Herenes-Faust, my co-host Braden Daniels, Napoleon Ryan as our featured guest, and also Michael Smith. We bid you all good night, everyone.
Good night.